in your head. I know you do. The girl on the fake orgasm scene, the girl with the perfect haircut, arguing about high heels in a deli, that girl is a ghost. She's a fiction, a wonderful, charming fiction that Rob Reiner helped create. The real me? I've been in Maine for a long time. I bake bread. I watch the sea. I don't do interviews. I don't want the lights, but they keep calling. About Rob, about the story. And they're getting it all wrong. They're making it a drama about men, fathers and sons, power and revenge. They're forgetting the heart of it. They're forgetting Michelle. I flew back to California yesterday. I went straight to the house in Brentwood. The police tape is gone. It's just a house again. A beautiful, terrible house. I stood at the kitchen window where Michelle and I used to drink tea and talk for hours about everything except what was happening in the next room. They want the truth from Billy, from Tom, from Aaron Sorkin. They want the truth from the people who were fighting a war. But wars have casualties, and the main casualty was a woman who spent the last 10 years of her life being the peace treaty. I'm here to talk about her. The last time I saw her, she drove up to see me in Maine, just showed up. No warning. She looked thin, not fashion thin, bird bone thin, like a strong wind would carry her away. We sat on the porch. She didn't want wine. She wanted hot water with lemon. Her hands were always cold, she said. For hours, we talked about nothing. Her garden, my sourdough starter, old movies. Then, as the sun was setting, turning the whole ocean gold, she went silent. She just stared at the horizon, and she said very quietly, "He's gonna kill him, Meg." I thought I'd heard wrong. The wind was in the pines. "What, Shell?" She didn't turn. She kept looking at the sea. "Nick, he's gonna kill Rob. Not soon. Not in a rage. One day, when he's calculated the exact moment it will hurt the most, he will end his father's life. And he will do it because it's the only thing left he can take from him." I reached for her hand. It was ice. "Michelle, you have to leave. You have to get Rob, and you have to go. Now." She finally looked at me, and she smiled. The saddest, most knowing smile I've ever seen. "And go where, my love? This is my son. Where on earth is far enough away from your own son?" She wasn't a victim. That's the first thing you have to understand. Michelle was a strategist. She was the general in a war where her own army, her husband, had already surrendered. Her job was damage control. Her mission was to get Rob through each day with his soul intact. She had a system. It was brilliant, and it was heartbreaking. She would schedule work trips for Rob, a speaking engagement in Chicago, a charity thing in London. They were excuses. She was giving him breaks from the siege. 48 hours in a hotel room where he could breathe. She'd stay behind. She was the keeper of the gate, the one who faced Nick so Rob wouldn't have to. One time, Rob was in New York. He was actually at the Chateau Marmont, 10 miles away. She called me, whispering from her closet. "He's asking for the Amex. He wants to buy a car, a $200,000 car, for a friend." I told him the card was frozen. Her voice was steady, absolutely steady. "He's punching the wall next to the kitchen door, but he believes me. He'll believe me for another hour." She was a hostage negotiator in her own home, and her currency was lies. She tried to save Nick too. Don't ever think she didn't. Long after Rob had been broken, Michelle was still in the ring. She found therapists, healers, shamans, psychiatrists who specialized in extreme personality disorders. She took Nick to Sedona, to Costa Rica. She was the one who sat in those circles, holding his hand while he raged at her. She told me about the last healer, a woman in Topanga. The woman took Michelle aside afterward and said, "Your son has a void where his soul should be. You cannot fill a void. You can only seal it off, or you will fall in." Michelle fired her. She couldn't accept that. A mother cannot accept that. The turning point, the real turning point, wasn't a violent event. It was a birthday, Rob's 75th. Michelle planned a tiny dinner, just the three of them. She made his favorite meal. She bought a cake. Nick arrived late with two friends none of them knew. They were grim. They didn't speak. They just stood in the corner. Nick didn't say happy birthday. He handed Rob an envelope. Inside was a printout, a list of every film Rob had ever directed, and next to each one, a dollar amount, a tally. At the bottom it read, "Estimated emotional damages, $12.7 million, payable to Nicholas Reiner." Rob started to cry. Not from hurt, from shame. He was ashamed of his own tears in front of these strangers. And Michelle? She stood up. She walked over to Nick's friend, and she said, in a voice I'd never heard her use. "Get out of my house." They looked at Nick. He nodded, smirking. They left. Then she turned to Nick, and she said, "You are a pitiful little boy, and I am done begging you to be a man." She took the cake, the beautiful cake, and she threw it in the sink. Nick laughed. He laughed, and Rob just sat at the table, weeping into his hands. Michelle told me that was the night she knew she'd lost them both. After that, her mission changed. It was no longer about saving Nick or even saving Rob's spirit. It was about saving Rob's legacy, his story. She started secretly digitizing everything: old home movies, letters from Carl, script notes, Rob's political writings. She'd come to Maine with hard drives. "Keep these," she'd say, "for the biography, for the library, so they remember who he really was." She was building an ark for his memory, knowing the flood was coming. She also started leaving a trail. She'd send emails to herself, detailing incidents. Nick said today that legacy is a tax the dead levy on the living. She'd CC her lawyer and her sister on benign emails, just to create a timestamp, a record that she was alive and thinking on a certain day. She was creating evidence for a trial she knew would happen. The week before it happened, she sent me a package. It arrived yesterday. I opened it in the hotel. Inside was a single pearl earring. We'd bought a pair together in Paris, a lifetime ago. I'd lost one of mine years ago. She'd kept its mate. There was no note. That was her goodbye. Not to Rob, to me. She was tying up a loose end, making sure the pair was complete. She was putting her world in order. So when they tell you this is a story about a father and a son, you tell them they're wrong. This is a story about a wife, a mother, the smartest, strongest person in that house, who stood between a good man and the darkness for as long as she could, who documented the hurricane even as it tore her apart. They'll say she was collateral damage. She wasn't. She was the final target. Nick knew that to truly destroy Rob, he had to destroy the one thing that was still holding him together. He had to take Michelle, and he did. I won't be testifying. What would I say? That I knew? That I did nothing but keep hard drives and cry on the phone? That I have an earring and a memory of a woman staring at the sea, predicting her own murder? My truth is simple, and it's too late. Rob gave us all a fantasy of love, a perfect, romantic, enduring love. But the most profound love story he was ever in wasn't in a movie. It was in his own home. It was Michelle's love for him, a ferocious, tactical, hopeless love that stood guard until there was nothing left to guard. She was the director of their final years. She tried to stage a better ending, but the monster wasn't following the script. So remember her, not as a victim beside him, as the woman who stood in front of him until she couldn't stand anymore. That's the truth, and it's the only thing I have left of either of them. Let me tell you about the last scene. Not the one in the house, the one Michelle described to me. She had a fantasy. She whispered it to me on my porch that day. She said when it was all over, when Rob was gone, when Nick was finally gone, she would take what was left. Not the money, not the rights to the films. She'd take Rob's old wool coat, the one he wore on set of Misery. She'd take his reading glasses. She'd take a single paper clip he'd bent into a little shape while talking on the phone, and she'd go to a small town in Italy, a place with no movie theaters. She'd rent a room with a window that looked out on a quiet street, and she'd just be a woman in a room, holding a coat. That was her dream. Not to be Michelle Reiner, wife of the legend. To be a woman in a room, finally at peace. She never got her Italy. She got a crime scene in Brentwood. Here's what they won't find in any police report. Michelle knew she was going to die. She knew it the way you know a storm is coming. You feel it in the air. You see the greenish tint in the sky. She stopped making long-term plans. She stopped buying green bananas, she told me once, and laughed. A hollow, terrible laugh. Who buys green bananas when they know they might not be here to see them ripen? She wasn't depressed. She was realistic. She was a soldier who had seen the enemy's strength and knew her own defenses were made of paper. Her last act of defiance wasn't a scream. It was a whisper. She called me 3 days before, not to say goodbye, to give me instructions about the hard drives, about who should get what. She spoke in a calm, clear monotone, like she was reading a will, because she was. She was writing her own will with her voice. At the end, she paused. I heard her take a long, shaky breath, and she said, "Tell them I wasn't scared." At the end, Tell them that. I begged her to get on a plane, to come to me. It's too late for planes, Meg, she said. The runway is gone. So, the trial. They will dissect Nick's mind. They will analyze Rob's parenting. They will turn their lives into a public autopsy. But no one will talk about the love that was the real casualty. Not Rob's love for Nick. That love was a disease by the end. It was a cancer that consumed him. I'm talking about the quiet, daily, choosing love. Michelle choosing to stay, choosing to face the monster every morning, choosing to lie to protect her husband's crumbling dignity, choosing to be the villain in her son's story so Rob could remain the hero in his own. That kind of love doesn't make headlines. It doesn't get dramatized. It's the love of turning off the lights, of locking the door at night, of watching the shadows in the hall. It's a love that wears you down to bone. I loved them both. But I loved her more, because I saw the cost. Rob got to be the tragic figure, the great man brought down. Michelle was the stage man, the one who saw the set crumbling and tried to hold the flats upright with her bare hands. When you watch When Harry Met Sally, you see the fantasy I helped sell. You see the deli, the laugh, the perfect ending. But the real love story, the one that matters, happened off-screen. It happened in a silent house where a woman watched the man she loved disappear piece by piece, and she loved every disappearing piece until there was nothing left to love. That's the truth. Not about murder or madness or Hollywood cover-ups. It's about a woman who loved a man so much she stayed until the story killed her. And she did it because she believed to her last breath that her love was the only thing standing between him and the dark. She was wrong. But my God, was it beautiful to watch her try. I'm going back to Maine tomorrow. I'm taking the earring. I'm taking the memory of her on my porch, watching the sea. I'm leaving the hard drives with their lawyer. Let the biographers fight over them. Let the world have its version. My version is this. Rob Reiner gave us a fantasy of love that made millions believe. But Michelle Reiner lived a reality of love that would have broken anyone else. And in the end, the fantasy was no match for the reality. The credit always goes to the director, but someone has to hold the light. She held it until her hands burned. That's my cut. That's my final scene. No fake orgasm, no happy ending, just a woman, a coat, and a quiet room in Italy that will forever be empty. Fade out.